Hi there, this is Sarah from IN Accountancy, and today we want to take a look at time to pay arrangements. If you're a business or an individual who is struggling to pay their tax liability to HMRC, it's really tempting to kind of bury your head in the sand and hope that it goes away, and that just doesn't work. It really doesn't. Contrary to popular belief, if you're proactive, if you talk to HMRC, if you've got a decent track record and you go to them with a plan, they can be really flexible and understanding and work with you to help you cover a temporary problem with cash flow, as long as they believe that you are fully intending to repay any tax that's owed in full, and that you have the wherewithal to do that. So without further ado, let's have a look at what a time to pay arrangement is, who can do a time to pay arrangement, to cover what taxes and so on, the best way to go about it to get the best result you possibly can, and of course we'd better look at what happens if you miss a payment. So time to pay arrangements, essentially they are what they say in the tin. So if you have a short-term challenge with cash flow and you can't cover one of your tax bills, whether that is, it's applicable to any type of tax. It could be national insurance contributions, it could be income tax or tax on dividends for you personally. It could also be pay-as-you-earn tax, VAT, corporation tax. So any of the taxes there. The most important thing to do is to know your numbers and be proactive. It's very difficult to get a time to pay arrangement once you're already late with a tax liability. But essentially, it is simply just an agreement with HMRC that you can pay the taxes that you owe over a number of months, in some cases even a number of years, but usually a number of months, to ensure that everything gets paid off in full, rather than having to pay by a specific date in one lump sum. So hopefully that makes sense. A few things to think about. As I've said 2 or 3 times already, you should only do this if you know you will be able to repay in full. And you've got to remember as well that even whenever you agree a time to pay arrangement up front with HMRC, they will charge interest on the late payments. So the payments that you will have to make will ultimately be greater than the payment should you make it in advance of the deadline in one lump sum. So there will be interest charged. There won't be any penalties as long as you have agreed upfront in advance of the payment deadline with HMRC. Really, whenever we're looking at whether a time to pay arrangement is for you or not, there are 3 areas to consider, in my opinion. So the first is actually about the tax that you need to pay. So how much do you owe? When is it due? And what can you afford to pay? Then you need to think about, I suppose, your plan for the payments, which is how long will it take for you to repay? Bearing in mind, you've got that interest element we've just discussed that you have to add on, and therefore you should attempt to pay it back as soon as you possibly can. But we also need to remember that you may have, especially if you're a company, you may have other tax liabilities that will fall due throughout this period, so you've got to factor those in. You can't keep wrapping future tax liabilities up into one time to pay arrangement. So the time to pay arrangement is only for the tax you agree to pay, if that makes sense. So let's take, for example, if it's for pay-as-you-earn, which does fall due every single month. So while you might have a plan to catch up on pay-as-you-earn that you owe, then you need to keep up with future pay-as-you-earn payments. You'll also need to keep up with future VAT payments and future corporation tax payments, or negotiate in bulk for all of those with HMRC. And then the third thing to consider is, are you going to stick to the plan? So that is, can you afford to? Do you really believe that you're going to stick to the plan? Because if you don't, skipped payments really can bring it all crashing down. So HMRC reserve the right that if you skip a payment, they can just totally wipe away that plan, and they can come after you for enforcement. But I'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. But only do it if you know you can afford it, you've got a temporary cash flow issue, and you know that you're going to stick to the plan. So, how do you go about it? Well, unfortunately, this isn't something that your agent can do for you. There might be occasions where you've had to involve a restructuring or insolvency practitioner, and at that point they might want to negotiate something on your behalf. But generally speaking, nowadays HMRC want you to call them. So you can't just do it over an online portal unless it's under a certain level of liability. But generally speaking, you need to phone them and you need to arrange the plan yourself. And really, I'm sure I don't need to say much of this, but whenever you're dealing with HMRC, whenever you're dealing with any negotiation, be proactive. So talk to them before the problem becomes a problem. Give them advance warning and talk to them. Be polite. You know, it's another human being on the end of the phone, and if you can get some sort of rapport with this person, if you can build some sort of trust, if you can show them that actually you know your numbers, you know what you're doing, you know you've got a short-term problem, they will do their best to help. And certainly we've seen them be very generous with some and not so generous with others, because there is a certain amount of human to human negotiation going on here, really. You've got to know your numbers. Don't try to enter a negotiation without knowing exactly what tax you owe, exactly when it's due, exactly what else you've got coming up, and without knowing your future cash flow, without knowing that you can get yourself out of and beyond the trouble that you might find yourself currently in. And number 4 on that is just have a plan. So don't expect them to come to you, and like any good negotiation, have your best case ideal scenario and have your what can you accept, what can you work with. And don't be afraid to show those cards to a certain extent, because what you don't want to get into is that position where you find yourself agreeing to something that you just know that you simply cannot afford. So whenever you call HMRC, you need to have a few things to hand before you're going to be able to have a successful outcome. So the phone number that you need for this time to pay arrangement is 0300 200 3835. So hopefully that's at the bottom of the screen now and you'll be able to take note of that, but we'll drop it in the description as well. You'll need to have your contact details, your name, your address, your telephone number, your email address, and that of your business or your registered office addresses. You'll need to have your UTR, so that's your unique tax reference number, either for you as an individual or for you as a company. And if it's a VAT liability that's outstanding or that you want to negotiate for, you also need to have your VAT number to provide them with that. Unfortunately, not all HMRC systems are completely aligned and talking to each other and integrated very well. So your pay as you earn, obviously, if you're trying to negotiate and pay as you earn, would be useful to have to hand too, because as I say, not every system talks to each other. So you then need the details of the tax for which you're wanting to negotiate your time to pay arrangement. So that's the how much is due, when it's due, and you need to give them a reason as to why you're not able to pay in a lump sum before the deadline. So once you've done that, then you need to discuss with them your plan to pay, your time to pay arrangement. So how long do you need? How much can you pay? How long will it take for you to pay off? How are you going to pay it? Are you going to set up a direct debit with them? Are you going to set up a standing order? Are you going to give them a payment there and then? Are you going to do bank transfers? Are you going to send them a cheque? Ideally, they will want a direct debit or standing order setting up. And they might request more information. They might request that you send them some management accounts for the business or some cash flow forecasts to show that you have expectations that things will improve going forward. So what happens if you miss a payment? Really, it's a last resort. We really don't want to miss any payments once you're in the time to pay arrangement. Don't want to miss any payments anyway, but once you're in a time to pay arrangement, it can become incredibly costly for you, and costly in all sorts of ways. So not only will you have had interest being charged while any of these payments have been late, but you will then start to incur penalties. And penalties can be up to 100% of the liability if HMR think that you are really trying to avoid or fraudulently not pay tax that's due to them. They can go down the enforcement route. They could start a winding up petition against your business. They could start bankruptcy proceedings against you as an individual. They could send the bailiffs round to your house or your business property to seize assets to repay the tax that you owe. And they could, as I say, force the closure of your company. So it's really, really important to keep up with those payments. And again, if you think that you're going to skip a payment, if you think that that's going to happen due to circumstances beyond your control, again, lift the phone, talk to them in advance of that happening. The more proactive you are in your communication with them, the more chance you've got of having some sort of successful outcome in this negotiation and getting through that difficult period. And last but not least, please don't bury your head in the sand. There are people out there who can support you. There are professionals out there who can help potentially negotiate on your behalf. And also put the options in front of you as to what you could do should your business be really struggling and in the position where it may not be able to fulfill its tax obligations and survive. So please reach out and take proactive advice so at least you know what your options are. So I hope that makes sense and it gives you a bit of a insight into what you can do if you've got a temporary cash flow problem in your business and you need to negotiate a time to pay arrangement with the HMRC. As ever, any questions, drop them in the comments. If you think you know somebody that would find this useful, please feel free to share or point them in my direction. And any questions, please ask. Thank you, bye for now.